to see you. Yeah, to see you. Saw you at the Chabad Highland. Oh, I saw you at Michael Putney. No way. I had no idea. Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. I'm sure it'll be the same this year. Check 1, 2.
Bye, Guido. You and I could sit. You and I. We're on a normal spot.
we sitting? Just some back.
Welcome, everyone. I want to invite you to please take your seats and turn off your cell phones if you have them. Take them out of your pockets, turn them off. not silenced, not vibrate, off. Papagito. Welcome. Bruchim Abayim. In Hebrew, that means welcome. Welcome to the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center and for the city of Aventura's official annual commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was 78 years ago tomorrow, on January 27th, 1945, that the Allies liberated the largest Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. Tomorrow is marked all over the world to remember the victims of the Holocaust, among them 6 million Jews, and to promote Holocaust education and awareness. My name is Rabbi Jonathan Birkin, and I am one of the rabbis of this synagogue. And it is my honor to welcome the students and faculty of the Don Soffer Aventura High School, Principal Jeffrey McKee, Assistant Principal Pamela Clapier, Social Studies teacher Shirley Cohen, our honored Holocaust survivor and special guest speaker Stella Sonnenschein, who will present together with her daughter Gail, our mayor, Howard Weinberg, city manager Ron Wasson, assistant city manager Brian Peguias, the entire Aventura City Commission, Dr. Linda Marks, Rachel Saltzman, Amit Bloom, Billy Joel, Michael Stern, Paul Cruz, Chief of Police Michael Bentalila. We are gathered here in the Ida and Harry Soffer Sanctuary, named for the beloved late parents of Don Soffer, the philanthropist and real estate developer whose visionary leadership led to the very creation of this city of excellence and whose name your school proudly bears. It's always good to see you, Don, and your wife, Michelle, in your very own spiritual home. We thank you for all that you do for our community and for this congregation. Let's give them a round of applause. It is also wonderful to have with us today our founding chairman of this congregation, Mr. William Landa, a Holocaust survivor himself, and his wife, Carol. Several decades ago, it was his tireless efforts and personal philanthropy that made the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center a reality, and we simply would not be here without Bill's years of leadership. We thank you as well for everything that you did and everything that you continue to do. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to also thank some volunteer parents of the Don Soffer Aventura High School who worked closely with my colleague here at the synagogue, Rabbi Guido Cohen, to put together this meaningful program. To Gimel Bentis, Diane Gleit, Cindy Orlinsky, we thank you for your leadership and for your efforts. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Today, we will learn about the Holocaust, not from a book, not from a movie, and not from a historical document. We will be privileged to hear firsthand testimony from someone, Stella Sonnenschein, who survived the Holocaust herself. Every Sabbath, every Shabbat, here in the Soffer sanctuary, we are blessed to pray with many Holocaust survivors who went on to live long, fulfilling lives with growing families of their own. Their spirit, their zest for life is always an inspiration. And even though the personal testimony that we will hear today is about events that happened decades ago, it's important that we not think of Holocaust education as only history. Of course, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, but we don't have to go so far back in time or all the way to Europe to find modern-day examples of anti-Semitism, of racism, of dehumanization, and of all forms of hatred in both word and violent deed. Some of you may know that it was just over 4 years ago, on October 27th, 2018, in the city of Pittsburgh, that a rabid anti-Semitic murderer entered the Tree of Life synagogue and shot and killed 11 innocent Jews, massacring them while they prayed on the Jewish Sabbath. While shooting, the man shouted out loud, "All Jews must die." That synagogue, Tree of Life, was my childhood synagogue. I grew up there. My father was the rabbi there. The people who died there were people that I knew when I was younger than all of you. It was the deadliest attack against Jews in the history of the United States of America. It is hard to believe that nearly 80 years after the Holocaust, someone could hate Jews so much in this day and in this age to do what that man did. But then again, while we wait for the anti-Semitic data of 2022 to be calculated, let me tell you about 2021. There were 2,717 acts of anti-Semitism in the United States that included assault, harassment, vandalism, and it represents the highest number of incidents on record since the Anti-Defamation League began tracking this data in 1979. And it represents an average of more than 7 incidents per day and a 34% increase from the previous year, 2020. Attacks against Jewish institutions, including Jewish community centers and synagogues, were up 61%. Incidents at kindergarten through 12th grade schools, up 106%. Incidents on college campuses, up 21%. And assault, considered the most serious type because it involves person-to-person physical violence triggered by anti-Semitic animus, increased 167%. Harassment up 43%, vandalism 14%. Last month, or 2 months ago, Kanye West said on television that people should, quote, "stop dissing the Nazis," and that what Jews, quote, "are about is making money." And before that on Twitter, he posted an image of a Nazi swastika infused with a Jewish Star of David and wrote in the middle of the night that when he wakes up, he is going to, quote, "go DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people." And if you find these stories shocking, you should. It pales in comparison to what you will hear soon from Stella Sonnenschein. But these stories are happening now, in more and more places, more and more frequently. That is the honest, harsh truth. Anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred and racism are on the rise, and they don't always take the forms of shootings or hostage-taking or beatings. It can be in the form of a comment that you hear at school, maybe even disguised as a joke. Something about Jews and money, or Jewish power, or maybe a Jewish nose. It can be an assumption that someone makes about another person because of the color of their skin, or the country they come from, or the language they speak, or the religion they practice. The ongoing fight against all forms of prejudice, bigotry, discrimination, bias, and intolerance is what we learn to do better when we learn about the Holocaust. It's a fight we all must fight every single day of our lives. It's often said about the Holocaust that while it took only a small number of actual perpetrators, in order for it to succeed, it relied on large populations of good people staying silent, remaining quiet, looking the other way, scared to speak up or speak out. We hope, that today will inspire you in the ongoing modern fight against anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, and bigotry. May we never be silent in the face of injustice, and may we never again allow an atrocity like the Holocaust to happen to anyone, anywhere, ever. Going to welcome my dear colleague, Rabbi Guido Cohen, who will lead us and students from the Don Soffer High School in the lighting of the memorial candles and the introduction of our distinguished guest speaker, our survivor, Stella, and her daughter, Gail. Let's give Rabbi Guido a round of applause. It's his initiative to put this together.
Bruchim Abayim, welcome. As Rabbi Berkun mentioned, I'm one of the rabbis here at the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center. I'm also the chaplain of the city of Aventura. But even more important than that, I'm part of the Don Soffer Aventura High School community. I'm a proud parent of a student wearing the colors of the school, orange and blue, the Barracuda colors. And I'm very proud of this event that started in an informal conversation with Diane and Cindy more than a year ago, and then we brought other people to the table, Miss Cohen. The original idea was to bring a Holocaust survivor to speak to a class of the school. That was the original idea. And then we started dreaming. And we said, why not do something bigger? And as we were talking before the beginning of the event, this kind of event is what makes the city of Aventura unique. Because as easy as it may have been for you to walk a couple of blocks this morning from the school to the synagogue to listen to the testimony of a Holocaust survivor, there are not many cities in the country, or maybe in the world, that can do an event like this. And I am very proud and very grateful to the commissioners, to Mayor Weinberg, to the principal of the school, to all the teachers, to the students, to their parents who signed all the waivers to allow you to come here. We had to sign 3 papers. But I also want to tell you that you have a huge responsibility this morning, because when we planned this event, we were concerned that if you see how many students the school has and how many seats the synagogue has, in theory, we wouldn't be allowed to sit every single student at the synagogue. But there are some that are not here with us this morning, for a variety of reasons, many of them justifiable. But there are people who are not here this morning with us. There are people who maybe will never have the privilege of listening to a Holocaust survivor. And so you have a responsibility to tell the story that you will hear this morning. To your classmates who are not here today, to your younger siblings that maybe by the moment they are Barracuda students, there are no Holocaust survivors around, to your parents, to your friends. The fact that you are going to be exposed to a first-hand testimony of the darkest page in the history of humankind is not something you should take for granted. Those of us who are in our 40s, in our 50s, in our 60s, we grew up listening to stories like this every single day of our lives. Many of us grew up with stories like this in our very own families. But people your age don't get to listen to a Holocaust survivor quite often. And in a couple of years, we will only be able to listen to their testimonies through video. So you have a responsibility, and the responsibility is to carry the torch. That is why, symbolically, when we conduct a ceremony to remember the victims of the Holocaust, we light candles. We light candles because we know that as long as the flame is burning, you can always bring another candle close to that flame, and even if that old candle will eventually extinguish, the fire will continue to live on forever. So today we light candles in the hope that the candles of your souls are lit with the testimony of Stella Sonnenschein, and that you carry the responsibility to light many more candles, to kindle more flames with this story so that it's never forgotten and we can truly say never again. I want to invite the students that were honored today with lighting the 6 candles in memory of 6 million Jews who perished in the Shoah: Sophia Edelberg, student government president; Mia Biton, 12th grade class president; Ethan Bazak, 11th grade class president; Mia Gal, 10th grade class president; and our very own Samantha Gross, 9th grade class president, together with the student speaker Claude Buffett Mogul. Please join us on the bima. Please rise. You may be seated. And now we welcome Stella Sonnenschein, Holocaust survivor, together with her daughter Gail, second generation Holocaust survivor. If you have not turned your phones off yet, this is the moment you make sure they are muted, they are off. Let's give Stella and Gail our undivided attention. And if you are going to eventually post any pictures or put something on social media, there's a campaign by the World Jewish Congress that we use the hashtag #WeRemember when we post things connected to this event. So make sure you use that hashtag, you tag the school, the city of Aventura. But for now, let's keep our phones off and give Stella and Gail our undivided attention.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you all so much for coming today and for hearing my mom's story. And we just want to say we're not professional speakers. My mother especially has never spoken in front of so many people before. We're just a regular mother and daughter who lives here in Aventura, and this is obviously a hard topic for her to talk about, but she felt that it's important for her to participate, so here we are. So we're keeping it very casual, kind of a mother and daughter, the way we talk in her kitchen table about her life stories. Also, I just want to add before we start that every Holocaust survivor had their own journey. Some of them were in concentration camps, some of them were partisans in the forest, some of them, every one of them had their own story. You may have the opportunity to meet some others here in Aventura, and I encourage you to get everybody's story and journey. But today we're here to talk about my mom's story. So are you okay to start? Or just come a little closer to the microphone.
Yes.
Can you hear? Can you talk a little?
Can you hear?
Yeah, okay, good. So let's just talk about when you were born, and let's maybe start by talking about this picture behind me.
Okay, so I was born in Warsaw in 1935. Can you hear me? Yeah. This is a picture from before the war. That's the only picture that we have from before the war, and it was sent to a relative because nothing else was left. But this was sent to a relative before the war, so that's how we retrieved it. And this is my beloved brother who was killed when he was 13. So that's the only picture from before the war. We lived in Warsaw in a very comfortable, large apartment. We had fun. My both parents were working. They were in business, and they were quite successful. And they went to theaters, and they went like we do here, normal. They had dinners and parties and hard work. And they were also active in a temple, and it was a normal life the way we have it here, and everybody thinks that that's how life will go. But things can change suddenly. When in 1939, suddenly you saw a tremendous amount, like a school of planes that came, and I saw the bombs falling, and I was 4 years old when the war started. So I saw suddenly the planes were like maybe 12, 15 planes, and the bombs were falling like on an angle. That's what I remember. And they looked like falling stars. They suddenly, against the dark sky, they looked like red stars that were falling down. And then I remember running through the streets. My mother and my father and my brother, my mother was holding us. Fire was coming out from some windows, and we were running because my father was in civil defense, volunteering, and he was taking care of some wounded people in a place where my mother knew where he was located. So we were running to come to be together with my father. And I remember when we came, he was taking care of some wounded people with, I remember, like blood, and he put us in a staircase there. That's as much as I remember from the very beginning when the war started. And then we still lived in our beautiful apartment for a while. Of course, I didn't see any Germans until then, but one day, 2 Germans came to our apartment, and in our dining room, we had a big round table, and they held guns to my mother, especially one with very sharp blue eyes, with that head that I could never forget. And And my brother and myself were hiding behind the door, looking at him and saying, I have to remember that face because when the war is over in a few months, that's my memory. I will find him and I'm gonna punish him. I was 4, so that's my memory. And because he's gonna kill my mother, Luckily, and he was demanding, from what I remember, like soap and schmuck and radio, whatever. And I understood some of the German, but not all of it, And whether my mother gave him what she had or whether thank God he didn't kill my mom. And that was the first German that I saw that then were occupying and killing and all that. After a while, they formed a ghetto. Ghetto was a section of Warsaw that was surrounded by a big wall with the barbed wires and all kinds of checkpoints, and put all the Jews from Warsaw, from the surrounding areas, and also came from Lodz and from other cities, and in a small amount of part of the city of Warsaw, they put in like, I don't know, 500,000, I really didn't check the numbers, and we were like squeezed. Suddenly from this big, beautiful apartment, we were in a small apartment with maybe 15 other people, and we were lucky that we had a room for the 4 of us, my mother, my father, my brother, and me. And I remember there was a bed, and the only thing that I remember about this room was that it had like a border of flowers all around the ceiling. And when I was in the bed, I was always watching the flowers and thinking of better times, because you didn't see flowers in ghetto, So there was like the only thing that reminded you of happiness. And I remember still the flowers around the border of the wallpaper. And we were there for a while. My father was, before the war, he was a partner with a Danish citizen that was like a kind of economic representative or consul from Denmark. Denmark at that time was still neutral. So he was, and my father did business with him before the war, so they were good friends. And his name was Mr. Mikkelson. And they had this factory of silver boxes and powder boxes for people that, for gifts and things. It was included in the ghetto part, and they were manufacturing those silver boxes, and the Germans were coming several times a week to collect the boxes for their officers, for their wives, and there were factories in ghetto Warsaw that were supplying, like forced labor, that were supplying merchandise for the Germans. There was a factory with brooms. There were factories that did part of the uniforms, whatever the German needed, and they employed some of the thing. And actually, some of the people from the other side, which was the Polish side, the whole thing was Polish, but from the Irish side, they were coming through the checkpoint every morning, working in the factory and going back after the checkpoint. They were like workers as well. So my father couldn't be a partner anymore because Jews were not allowed to have factories, so he was considered the director. And that's how it remained, that he was the director of the factory. And after a while, there were myself, and also they had a partner who was really a specialist in that field, Mr. Wolski, and he had a younger child than myself. At that point, I was 5 and 6, and we were staying in our apartment, which was, I think we were in a couple apartments, if I remember. I just remember the one with the flowers. And after a while, sometimes we slept over there. In the factory had like, I think 3 or 4 stories. And I had a room, which was like some machinery was there. And there was a cabinet, like a long cabinet against the wall. And the cabinet had the sliding doors. It was like a low cabinet for merchandise, but it had the sliding doors, and my parents did some openings in the back of the cabinet, and when the Germans were coming, they would put me right in that cabinet, and I was staying there until they left, because children were not supposed to be in a factory for sure, but not even visible, and you never know what would have happened. So that's how it was happening over and over. Also, there was always somebody on the lookout. And when they knew that the Germans were coming, everything was being hidden, the people that were not supposed to be there. And next to our factory, there was another factory with like only 1 floor, and they had an attic. And when they were coming, we were also running when there was no time to, they put me in the cabinet. But otherwise, we were running to that other factory that I don't know how it was connected with ours. And my father was friends with the owner or manager of that factory. And that was like a big room, high ceilings, and next to it, and there was a closet for the clothes for the workers. And we used to go through that closet to a small room, and then there was a ladder. We would go quickly up the ladder and hide on the attic. And the attic was like maybe 10, 15 people at a time were running up quickly. And my father was always the last one. He would pull up the ladder and close the thing, and we had to be very quiet because you could hear the Germans and loud and yelling and screaming, Raus, and and we were like so quiet that somebody had a child there, and the child was coughing or crying, and the mother almost had to put a pillow to choke him, because if the German would hear that somebody is hiding there, all of us would be dead. So this was happening quite a few times. And the owner of that factory was like a factory of bottles or little something, I don't remember, like medicine bottles or perfume bottles. And there was a little girl, and she was not really my friend, but I remember once I was running up that ladder quickly, and the girl pushed me down, and she says, it's my factory, it's my grandfather, I go first, And I remember that I said to my father, because he was down holding the ladder, and I said, that's not fair, why did she push me down? And my father wanted to calm me down, and he says, don't worry, the smart people give in to the stupid ones, just to give me satisfaction. That was his loving, thing. And then he took me quickly under the arm and pushed me and took me up the ladder. Those are the little things that I remember from that thing. And later on was getting worse and worse. At the beginning, when ghetto started, they had like a kindergarten or nursery schools, and we were still going to school. And I remember going with like other kids, maybe there were 10 of us, and we were marching to that kindergarten or whatever that school was. At that point, I was like 5 or 6, but that was the only school that we did. And there were already children on the street laying down, begging for bread, for anything. And I saw, every day I saw this little girl and a brother that must have been like 3 years old, and she was begging, and the brother, and at that point I was still very lucky. I had both my parents, and they were providing for me. I didn't know what hunger is because I was never really hungry. Before, I didn't have a big appetite to begin with from before the war. So it wasn't an issue. So my parents probably scraped for themselves and gave me a little sandwich, but I didn't care, and I felt sorry for that little girl. So I always gave her my sandwich, and not knowing how hard it was to get a little piece of bread, you know. But also because I had it much better than she had. And then a couple days later, I saw the little brother was already dead, and it was covered with a newspaper, and there were flies flying. Those are the pictures that I remember. And then I remember there were like wagons in the ghetto of dead people that were collected, like little, with the two-wheel wagons, and they were collecting the dead people, and I don't know where they were taking them. That was at the beginning. Later on, there were no more school, and we were basically hiding. Even in ghetto, we were trying not to be visible because the Germans were walking like kings and beating people and pulling them by the beard. Some people had beards, you know, and pulling them and kicking them, and for no reason, just like animals, you know. So it was getting more and more. The hunger, the sickness was getting very difficult. And we were still in sort of hiding on and off, but basically nobody tried to be seen by the Germans, you know. And after a while, the Germans saw, the Gestapo, they saw that the people were sick and dying, and they were all the time taking transports of people away and putting them in wagons and cars and taking them to Treblinka, which was a concentration camp, but it really wasn't it was a death camp. It was like you brought them in and they were putting them, killing them, burning them, torturing them. So my father was connected with the Polish underground, and also my uncles, because they were already considered the elders, you know. Young people like yourself were the source of the young people that still were like the working, but the older people, like my father was already 40 years old, that considered the elder, you know, and he was prominent and connected, and he had money, so they were buying ammunitions and buying guns for the uprising, because they were already talking about the uprising in ghetto Warsaw, which became the most famous uprising of Jews in ghetto, where they knew that they will be killed and destroyed, and so they wanted to die with honor. They said, no matter what will happen, we want to die with honor. We don't want to just die like, you know. So my uncle, one of my uncles, actually, there is a book written about him. But we were all, they were all like trying to buy from the other side whatever they could. And it was not easy to smuggle. Young people sometimes try to make tunnels under the wall, and they were going, but they had to be skinny and small to go through those little holes under the wall and smuggle in bread or ammunition. If they were caught, which very seldom, very often they would be caught, because the Germans sometimes knew about those little tunnels under the wall. They would be killed, they would be beaten, they would be, you know, so the little boys were really risking themselves, their life, but they were bringing bread to their family or whatever they could. And also that's the way they were smuggling some of the ammunition for the uprising. So I'm kind of going back and forth, I'm sorry.
Mom, why don't you talk about how the Nazis required all the children to come to the plaza.
So at some point, the German decided that the Jews, the children, should leave ghetto, and they would announce to the people that all the children should be brought into the town square, like a big square, and bring like the necessities, bring the little suitcase, because the children are suffering in ghetto, and they will be able to bring them to the fresh air and give them food because they were starving, and they will treat them respectfully and so on. So most people that still had children or children that had no parents anymore, they all came with whatever they had, with a little teddy bear, with a little suitcase, with a name, and they were brought into that square. And somehow my parents and some other people felt that you cannot trust them, and they didn't bring me or my brother and some of my other people that didn't want to do that. But all the thousands of children that were brought in over and over, they were taken straight to Treblinka or to other place, and they killed them right there. There was no summer camp, no concentration for children. They were like just to be killed. So I was throughout the ghetto, you know. When you talk to me, you know that I was one of the lucky ones, because 1.5 million children like myself that didn't do anything wrong, that were good children, that were like your brothers, like your sisters, and they were just killed because they were Jewish, you know. There were no reason, no other reason. So I was like super lucky. Anyway, at that point, coming back to the thing where children were not supposed to be visible in ghetto, because all the children were caught and taken away. So I was being hidden in ghetto already, and that time I was in that factory on the 3rd floor or 4th floor, and each time somebody would come, I would be. But became so difficult. One time, they kept me in that credenza, in that closet for a very long time, and the other partner had a younger child, and there was a pail with diapers in the same cabinet, and the smell from that pail almost killed me, the smell and the tightness. Usually it wasn't built to be like for hours in that thing. When they pulled me out, I was almost dead in that thing, and I remember I said, if that's the way I have to live, I'd rather die. That was the first time that I said, I don't want to live that way. But regardless of what I said, my parents decided to put me in a safer place, and it was very hard, especially it was very hard for ordinary people to have a child taken out from ghetto, because imagine being surrounded by barbed wire and there's no way of escaping. But again, I was kind of lucky that my parents knew this social worker who decided, a Polish young woman who saw how much suffering and how much destroy they did for the children, and she heard about the burning and the killing of the concentration of the camps. So she decided to risk her life and take as many children from ghetto as she could. So I was one of the lucky ones. Supposedly, this group of women took out 2,000 children from ghetto that survived. The 2,000 are probably now 100,000 if they survived, I think, because they had children and grandchildren and so on. But she later on was caught by the Gestapo and tortured, but luckily she survived, and she lived in Poland, and I think she was given, it was her and her group of organization friends. So I'm not sure whether it was Irina Sandler or her group, but one of those wonderful, brave heroes of mine. So she took me out, but that was after months of my parents.
Mom, let's just step back for a second. Before she took you out, let's talk about what your parents told you.
That's right. Now I had to learn
They had to give you a new identity.
Yeah, I had to totally learn a new identity. My name was Esther Bernstein. I became Stasia Borkowska. I had to learn Polish prayers to Jesus and all that over and over again.
The Catholic
The
prayers.
Catholic prayers, yeah.
And you were, just to clarify, they were going to position you as a Catholic orphan.
Yes.
So you had to learn
I had to, yes, of course. Thank you. I was supposed to be an orphan that my parents were killed in 1939. My mother was a blonde, my mother was a brunette with the dark eyes. Now she became a blonde in my thing. And I became like totally a different child. And I had to learn it over and over. And my parents told me, remember who you are, but don't mention to anybody, God forbid, because that means that. And children that time, they were very smart. They saw the killings, they saw the torture, they saw everything. So they knew to be scared and to follow the instructions. But over and over, my new name, my new prayers, my new parents, my new family. My father sadly was a mailman. My mother was a typist, completely different picture of my life. And since then, I became like a criminals now that are being transferred to a different place and new identity. And at that point, I was like a 7-year-old child that lived with completely new identity. And that was...
How do you think Grandma and your father must have felt to give you away like that? How desperate they must have been.
Well, of course, they knew more. When they gave me away, they said, it's going to take a few months, and we're going to meet soon again, and it's just for you to have a better life. And they explained to me in such a way that it wasn't a final thing that they're never going to see me again. It was more like, you go because those are good people, they will take care of you, and you will get out of this hell here, And they made me feel comfortable. Just remember the new name, remember your new identity. And they made me feel that this is a temporary situation. I didn't know all the things that I learned as time went on. So since then, I became like a hidden child. And I was being hidden not only in the ghetto, but then I was being hidden by strangers. But basically, people were very nice to me because they knew I was an orphan. The first family was a guy that worked in the factory, and he knew my parents, and he had a sick child with polio, and he really needed money for the medications and for the treatment of that polio child. So he was getting quite a bit of money, and they were so nice to me that my mother gave her purse and everything just to be good to me, And they said, don't worry, my wife is going to be as good as a mother. And they were really good. Unfortunately, after a while, but while I was there was the uprising in ghetto. And that was for somebody who knew that her parents live in ghetto, and I was 7 years old. I saw the sky was red, like this, actually like red, all over Warsaw. The ghetto was burning, and that was after the 2 weeks of uprising where the uprising was so intense that even the Germans with tanks were afraid to come into ghetto because there were young people with Molotov bottles and from the rooftops, from the windows, they were shooting the Germans. The Germans were afraid to get into ghetto because they were killed. So that was their satisfaction. Of course, a lot of people were killed, but it was really, so then the Germans decided to burn the whole ghetto. But they wanted to make sure that the ghetto is going to be burned, but the fire shouldn't spread all over Warsaw. So they had firemen around the borders of the ghetto, and the firemen were protecting the fire for spreading. And whoever was in ghetto that didn't have a chance to escape, they were burning, you know. So being that I was in the house of this man that was one of the directors in the factory, there was a telephone. He had a telephone connected to the factory. And that time, not everybody had a telephone, but he had, being that he was part of the thing. So the telephone was ringing, and they put my father on the phone, and he asked for me, and I was upset knowing that my family is in ghetto, but I couldn't express it. You know, I couldn't say anything. I was just worried. And I heard my father's voice, and he says, "You know who it is?" I said, "Yes," in a sad voice. And he says, "Don't," because he didn't want to say your father, because they don't know who is listening to the line, you know. And he says, "Just don't forget who you are, and be healthy, be safe." And I wanted to say, "I love you," and whatever, but it got cut off. And at that point, was cut off in my imagination, the fire took him over because I saw the fire and the red sky. And I thought of my brother, my mother, and my father burning in ghetto. And I knew that, imagine that you know there is a fire and your family is burning, and there's nothing that you can do, and you can't even show that you're scared. So I ran to the bathroom and I cried there, and you know, because it's a horrible feeling. So that was when the ghetto was burning. After that, the neighbors of his name was Yashu, Wujek Yashu. Now I'm mixing, there were so many different things. And some neighbors said, this man is working in ghetto, and suddenly young couple, and they have this child, she must be a Jewish child. So they started to bother him and say, "I think you have a Jewish child and you're hiding a Jewish thing, we're gonna report you." And reporting to the authorities mean like the whole family get, not only I would be killed, but they could be killed. They could be arrested and tortured, how did you get it, and all that. So they had to give me away to somebody else because it was too dangerous for them and for me. So he had 3 aunts that were like middle-aged. That time, in my opinion, they were old. They must have been like in the 40s, but when you're 7 years old, you think everybody over 20 is old, you know? And they were very kind. They didn't know that I was Jewish. To them, I was already an orphan, and they had good heart, and they kept me as an orphan, and they were very kind to me. I helped them in the kitchen. We were making pierogies, and everything was very good. And in that apartment, there was another, they had a large apartment. One room was like a couple, for some reason, I don't know, they were renting, and another room was also rented to a single gentleman, Mr. Guy. The reason I'm mentioning, because later on they had an important thing in my life. And I was with them for a while, and then in 1944, there was a Polish uprising. where the Polish, not in ghetto anymore, ghetto didn't exist anymore, everybody was killed, tortured, destroyed, burned, you know. The ghetto didn't exist. But some of the Jewish people that escaped ghetto for whatever reason, they lived also on Irish papers, you know.
When you say Irish, you mean Aryan.
Aryan, yeah.
Aryan.
Yeah. And they had false papers, and they were hiding sometimes in the villages, sometimes in Warsaw, like us think. So, I'm sorry if I talk too much.
So talk about the incident with Mr. Guy.
Yes, so there was this big uprising in Warsaw in 1944, in August. And that time, there was next to our building, when I was with the three aunts, I call everybody uncle and aunt, everybody that I was hiding. And there was a big school, and then there was always fighting. The Polish, the people that were fighting, the Polish thing, were fighting for this thing because they had a high building. And then the Germans were fighting. So our building was the next to that school, and they were destroyed completely, they were burned. But the basements were still in existence. So my aunt said, where are we gonna go? Everything is in ruins. The best thing is if we stay in those basements. So we stayed, we had like 2 rooms in the basement, and that's where we were hiding. They said when the war is over, we will get out from the basement. But there was no water, no electricity, and of course very little food, there's no food really. And one day, a bomb fell in again, although the building was already burned down, and you could, completely burn down, but the basements were good. But a bomb fell in, and suddenly became dark in that basement, and it was like no air. We were choking, we were coughing, and one of the exits, I saw fire at the end, and this Mr. Guy, the tenant, who was very nice, like middle-aged gentleman, he was there, and one of my aunts were there in the basement, and we were basically buried. There was like fire, I don't know what it was, but it was hard to get out, and we were like buried in that basement. And I remember begging, Mr. Guy, help me, I want to live, I'm young, because I didn't know I was going in the wrong direction. I saw fire on one side and this, so he took me by the elbows and pushed me out. We were both coughing and choking and everything, but we couldn't take out my aunt, my beloved, the youngest of the 3 sisters was my favorite one, and she was stuck there already. So the 2 sisters came back with water, and they said, where is Hella, where is Hella? And he says, I couldn't take her out, she's still there. So somehow they got in there, they pulled her out. Like 15 minutes later, she had 3rd-degree burns all over her body, and then she lived for a couple more days and she died. So I always had that guilt that he saved me, but he couldn't save her. So as a child, you live with a lot of guilt. And I remember that because I said, help me, save me. So he could only save one of us. So he saved me, and she died. So I had that, children have a lot of conscience that we don't realize it, but it really affects your being. And
So just to move it, because we're a
Yeah.
little short on time. So after that, when the whole area was bombed out,
Yes.
they evacuated you
yeah,
to
so
the
then
countryside.
there was the end of this uprising, and all the people that remained in Warsaw were transported to Grand Central Station, where there were trains going to different parts of Poland, different villages, to place the people that left Warsaw. And every farmer in that village or that town had to take a family. They were not happy about it because they were all poor, and suddenly they had to have people like, you will have to have 5 immigrants in your additional room to feed them and to make them happy. So they put us in a family of farmers. But before that, at the station, there was a neighbor that had like a chalet in the mountains of Poland, and she had a daughter more or less my age. So my 2 remaining aunts said, "Why don't you take Stasia with you?" My name was Stasia during the war. "So why don't you take her with her, with you? She's so poor and she's an orphan, and look how she looks. She's so skinny and so thing. Take her, thing." So she says, "Okay, I will take her with me." And I went with that woman and her daughter to her chalet, and it was like paradise, coming from hell to paradise. It was, suddenly I had the white sheets on the bed and food and everything. But at that point, I was very, very depressed because I knew that everybody was burned, everybody was killed, and I couldn't be, myself. So the woman said, "Look, soon the war will be over. It's already end of 44. The war ended in 45. And everything will be back to normal, and everybody will find their families and everything." And that's the first time after all the years that I didn't admit to being Jewish. I said, "I'm so sad." And she even, I remember, sang me like a song, "Why are you so sad? Why I see a tear down your thing?" I said, "The reason I'm so sad is because the war will be over, but I am Jewish, and all the Jews are killed, and my family, everybody is killed, and I have nobody left. So and she says, "Oh, are you Jewish?" She says, "I can't keep you here because I don't want to risk things." I said, I like you, but I can't keep you. You're going back to where you came from, because maybe somebody will recognize you, that you're from Warsaw or whatever." She put me back on the train to that village where we were sleeping on the straw in the farmer's kitchen, with my 2 aunts. And in that village, there was the son of the mayor that was a student. He and his wife married. They met at the university, and his father was a mayor of that village. And he, for some reason, came to stay with the father. And also his brother or sister had a child also. So he every day was coming to check not only on us, but on all the repatriees from Warsaw, to make sure that they are not being abused, that they are fed, because that was his volunteering thing, to make sure that people are treated right. So every day he would come over and he would talk to me and ask me questions. And of course, I didn't say that I was Jewish. That was after that incident with that woman. I decided never, never, never to admit that I'm Jewish, because they will kill me too, So that was my point of forgetting about being Jewish. And at that point, every day he said, "You know what? I have this little niece, and she doesn't like to eat, and I would like you to come for dinner with us and show her how hungry children are eating." So he invited me for dinner, and then for another time and another time. And I was so happy. First of all, I have good food. And secondly, I was modeling to that young girl how hungry children, so they gave me the dignity of feeling that you can eat with gusto without being polite, because I was modeling for the child how hungry I am, So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know we're a little bit short on time. No, so I just want to come to the end of the war. You ended up staying with that family.
yeah, so after a while they took me in with them. they said instead of taking you back and forth, and there was fall and rain, he says, we decided with my wife that you're going to stay with us instead of being on the straw with the farmer. And again, I got a nice little folding bed in the living room there, but they kind of divided it. And she was so wonderful to me. And they were really very, very good, blessed family.
So let's come to the end of the war. So just to summarize, so at the end of the war, I'm sorry to, but you know, I know time is short. By the end of the war, my mother's father had been killed in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, well, in a resistance movement, and her brother, unfortunately, had been killed also. I wish we had more time because they all had amazing stories. But your mother amazingly survived.
Yes.
You can talk about how.
Yeah. So my mother, which I didn't know, my mother was, when ghetto was burning, they bribed and they befriended some of the firemen, and they got a uniform of a fireman with a helmet, with the boots, and the uniform, and my mother wore the uniform, and one fireman went in front of her, one in back, and she was in the middle, and they went through the checkpoint. She didn't say anything, and the fireman took my mother to there was a small church on the other side of ghetto. And the fireman took my mother to that church, and the priest, which I bless him till today, he took my mother to the side, and he says, my mother was covered with smoke and everything from the fire, and he says, here lay my child, lay down, cover your face. And then people were coming, there was some kind of a situation, and he says, and after everybody left, he says, now wash up your face. And the fireman took back the uniform and everything, and she had the dress under the uniform, but they also took the boots, and she was barefoot because my father gave her shoes, but she couldn't carry them. And after everybody left, the priest said to my mother, and here, wash up and go with God, my child. And
So
my mother
he
left.
knew that he was in on it. He knew.
He was on it, yeah. The priest was really... and my mother had a hiding place that my father, when he said goodbye to her, he says, be a healthy mother to our children, and if we don't survive, if we survive, we will meet in a particular place where they had like prepared a hiding place and an address. And my mother went there, and and my brother was there already also. I don't know the details because it was too painful to ask my mother all those questions. And
Okay, take some water for a minute. So I'm going to just summarize towards the end of the war. So basically, at this point, my mother was living with that family in a very remote part of Poland. The war ended, and as you can imagine, there was no telephones, there was no internet, and my grandmother survived. Her husband had been killed, her son had been killed. The only thing that kept her going was the possibility that her daughter had survived. And it took her 6 months of trying to track my mother down. She finally landed through another amazing story at the doorstep of these people in this very remote part of Poland. And she landed there and she said, I'm Stasha's mother. And they said, well, that's impossible. Stasha's an orphan. And she said, no, I'm Stasha's mother. And they said, well, Stasha's mother was a tall blonde and you're a short brunette. And my grandmother said, bring Stasha in and let her be the judge. And my mother was playing outside, and they brought her in, and she recognized my grandmother. So that was a happy reunion to a very long journey.
yeah,
So, and then, I'm sorry, Mom, just to wrap up. After that, you lived in Poland for a while. You moved to Israel in 1950. In 1958,
Yeah.
you had a blind date, and
we fell in love, and we got married within 2 weeks. And because my husband went on vacation and he had to go back to work, and he couldn't. I said, come again next year. He says, a lot of things can happen during the year. Now we love each other, why do we have to wait a whole year? So we got married, and then he went back, and then I followed.
He was a survivor, too, of
Yeah, but
concentration
he had
camps.
a totally different story. He was in Auschwitz, he had a different life story, but we had a lot of common things in character and in our background. So we really were happily married for almost 60 years. Yeah.
So you came to America. I know you have very strong feelings about America and how lucky we are.
Tell you how lucky we are to live here. The freedom. And I want you to appreciate living without a war and without hate. Try to preserve it. Try to live as good as you can, because you never know what tomorrow happens. But if, God forbid, something happens, you have to, when you see anti-Semitism, when you see any kind of discrimination, any kind of hatred, stand up and say, I can't tolerate it. If your friends joke about it, in any, whether somebody is an invalid, whether somebody is, different race, different thing, forget about hating people. It's really all that starts with hate. All that starts with discrimination and thinking I am better than this group of people. So please love your fellow man and be kind. Don't use I hate this, I hate that. Say I love this, I love that. And use positive things instead of negative things. It's so easy to be positive and to be loving and to preserve your freedom, because you never know. Freedom is like we take for granted, but when you lose it, when you are burning in a ghetto and there's a fire and there's no way to escape, that's where you know that the freedom was gone, So please take it seriously. You are young, but this is the time to remember, and tell your children in the future and your grandchildren and your parents and anybody that you know that when somebody denies Holocaust, it can happen again if you don't fight it, if you don't say it happened. I met somebody that went through that, and please be vigilant.
Let's give her a round of applause. She told us to stand up, so let's stand up for Stella. I think the principal of the school, and we have a student that wants to come up and say some words. We had planned for Q&A. We still are hoping to have that opportunity, but I want to make sure that those who are prepared to make some presentations, that they have the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to someone you know very well, your principal. Let's give him a round of applause.
Rabbi Burke and Rabbi Cohen, we thank you so much for honoring us as guests in this holy place. Ms. Sonnenschein, your message is so beautiful, so powerful, like sunshine, appropriate name. And I'd like to take a moment, students. This is a message that's been repeated many times, never so powerfully as this, an eyewitness account of how horrible it can be, the outcome of anti-Semitism, hatred, really in any form. And I believe you all will continue to keep the flame burning, to resist, to oppose, and to stifle any such activity, any violence, any hatred, any racism, anti-Semitism, of course. And I'd like you to make a stand right now to show that you are committed to that throughout your life. So please stand, take a stand against all those wicked things, and show Ms. Sonnenschein how much you appreciate her presentation. Sanesh, and I thank you so much. I can't imagine how challenging it is, how much strength it must take to revisit those memories, but it's quite impressive. The heartbreaking memories, when they're channeled into a passionate purpose such as this, become heart-strengthening message, impact, or have a heart-strengthening impact, which clearly your heart is so strong and your message so powerful. And we hope that these flowers and throughout your life, you'll continue to find those flowers that bring your mind and your spirit to happy places, and continue to have wonderful people in your life. Your daughter, sounds like so many people have stepped up to love you and support you as you completely deserve. And you're an honored member of our school community as well. So thank you so much.
By the way, the paparazzi here, Howie Sonnenschein, that's her son. Stand up, Howard, just be recognized also.
So students, we're going to give Ms. Sonnenschein a little bit of a break, but as Claude speaks, this is one of our compassionate and brilliant seniors who is going to speak on behalf of our students. As she concludes her speech, I'd like you all to please line up in the center, and we will have time for questions. So Claude, thank you. The mic is all yours.
Thank you. For the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each one of us does his best. This is a quote by Viktor E. Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist who went on to write one of the best and most impactful books that I've ever read, A Man's Search for Meaning. The Holocaust was one of the bleakest points of human history. It was a dark, despicable chapter of systemic racism, anti-Semitism, and prejudice. While I am Jewish, I have Spanish family members who were not Jewish who also perished in the concentration camps. This leads me back to the quote that I mentioned before. The Holocaust was only ever able to happen because of the pre-existing ideas of anti-Semitism that had been brewing in Europe for many ages, as well as the cooperation and inaction of those who could have prevented it. We as a collective, we as a team, have the power to make change and influence as trailblazers. What is a trailblazer? Well, a trailblazer is a pioneer. They are a creative innovator that does something that nobody else had done before in the context that is novel. I am here today to give you this speech because of trailblazers. My dad's two gay men who had had children in a time where it was simply not done, and who were together and married before it was even legal, they are trailblazers. If prejudice had won, I would not be here to deliver this speech to you. I also want to mention my twin, a young woman in the field of classics and philosophy, who is a national competitor at ethics and debate and quiz bowls, who is the leader of multiple clubs in her school, who rises to the challenge of sexism. She is a trailblazer. She is making a meaningful impact in her community and is an inspiration. She is just like you. You personally and collectively have the power, have the influence to be trailblazers in the face of adversity. The Holocaust was able to slaughter as many people as it did because of inaction. My family members and millions of others died because people were not brave enough to resist conformity. We, as a collective, have the responsibility to be trailblazers in our own way and fight back against prejudice and intolerance when we see it, not just when it affects us. Thank you.
If there are any questions for Stella, I want to encourage you to use the microphone. It's a very famous Jewish quote that says, "The person who is shy never learns." So don't be shy and ask your questions.
Hi, my name is Dania, and I would like to say that you guys are so beautiful. And the question I have is, what language do you have?
What language?
What languages do you
I spoke Polish all the time because that's the language of that country. And I understood Yiddish, which is the Yiddish language of my parents, but I try to make believe that I don't understand. When the Germans were talking and they were yelling and I knew what they were saying, I had to make believe that I don't understand because that would give me up. So I had constantly to live under hidden person, you know.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Aiden, and I want to say thank you for sharing your story. And also, while you were constantly moving around throughout Poland from the ghettos to different houses, what motivated you to still have hope and keep on going?
Well, first of all, you just want to survive one more day, and you hope that the war will be over and all the Gestapo will be killed and all the bad things will be over. And I was one of the fortunate ones, as opposed to 1.5 million children like myself who were hoping just like I was hoping, and they didn't make it. They were killed, they were tortured, they were burned. So I have to speak for them, you know, including my brother, you know. So when you are in a situation like that, the life motivates you to survive. It's like a natural survival instinct that you do anything you can to survive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ethan. I'm a junior. I'd like to commend you for your commitment to passing on your story and to passing on the Jewish heritage. Now, the rabbi he spoke about carrying on a torch. He spoke about passing on, keeping your story alive. So my question is, what is the message that you'd like us, the future generation, to pass on to our children and to our grandchildren?
Well, thank you for asking. I really want, first of all, to follow on and know that you cannot accept the idea that Holocaust did not exist. Because if you close your eyes and make believe that everything is wonderful, it can happen again. If somebody is talking against Jews or against Spanish or against anybody, or maybe somebody that has blue eyes or brown eyes, or thing, you have to prevent it. You have to tell them, look, I cannot be your friend if you will feel that way, because that's not the right thing. You know, everybody's a human that's supposed to be regardless. And of course, now with the anti-Semitism, you have to be careful not to make it awake again, more and more. Not to let people, not to admire people that profess the anti-Semitism again, like it happens now in television.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Oran Ohana. First of all, of course, thank you, as well as I'd just like to say I've heard many Holocaust speakers talk, and a question that I ask sometimes because I'd like to see is when it came to Nazis and when it came to Germans and stuff, do you forgive them now, looking back at it, or do you still have something in your heart?
I cannot blame the young generation for what their grandfathers did, but I can't totally forgive them, but I hope that they repent and they will never do that again. And you cannot live with hate, because hate eats you, you know, hate, you have to live with the positive thing. So you think that they did something, but they have to be forgiven by somebody. When I think what they did to all the people, not just Jews, the 6 million Jews, but to other people too. Because war is war, but they did hatred, they did destroy the whole nation, so it's more than that. But I hope that the anti-Semitism that is building up now again and again in Europe, in the United States, will not happen again.
Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Franco Valenciano.
Morning.
First, I want to thank you for being here, for sharing such important information.
Thank you.
My question is, from the memories and experiences you felt, you've seen, and you have heard, what would you say is the most effective and efficient way to prevent anti-Semitism in the first place, both in the cultural and educational level?
If I knew that, I would be president of the world, not just of the United States. But I'm trying to do my share, and if I change somebody's mind about loving instead of hating, to me, that's my message. And if everybody of you, now that you heard my story and other people's stories, if you will speak follow-up, and like one thing at a time, it builds up, and then people don't hate without knowing why they're hating, you know? They have no reason to do that. And that causes anti-Semitism with little jokes, with little things like that. So I hope that you will do your share.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Noam Benartzi, and as someone who takes Israel for granted, as an Israeli with family there, what was it like to first arrive there and be able to live somewhere where you could openly be Jewish for the first time in a long time?
Well, it was like freedom all over again, because you don't have to hide that you are Jewish, first of all. It's that freedom of speaking how you feel without offending, without being afraid that you might be arrested, you know. Arriving to Israel and also in Poland, everybody was killed. Every stone was reminding you of the people that lived there, and they were killed and they were tortured. And there was a jail in Warsaw that my brother was tortured and killed. So every place was too painful to be there. And my mother felt that there was no place for me to live there. So coming to Israel was like coming to a new world. And I was received with love, and we had some family that left before the war. So it was a wonderful experience. And Israel is a wonderful, wonderful country. It really is.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ori Blang. First off, I'd like to say thank you for coming out and sharing the story. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we're extremely grateful for this opportunity. My question is, like, what gave you the courage to first share your story out loud and like explain all the hardships you had to go through during the Holocaust?
What was your question? I'm sorry.
Okay. So I'm asking, like, what gave you the courage to first come out with your story and like explain like the hardships you had to deal with during the Holocaust?
Oh, yes. At the beginning, it was really, really hard. Back like 30, 40 years ago, they asked me to speak in school, and I went a few times, but it was so hard and so emotional that I felt that I didn't, and they were young children, and I didn't want to make them upset, and I didn't want them to hear the horror stories that were coming to my mind. So I couldn't talk to them. And with my own children, I was very careful not to say everything that was on my mind. I was very careful not to scare them and to prepare them for a wonderful world and a wonderful life that we have in this country, you know. Freedom and all the happiness.
But eventually you started to speak, coming to this
Eventually, yes. Eventually, now I can not be emotional, almost, I'm sorry, and speak about things that are, at least the things that are important. There are so many things that I can't even now talk about because it brings such a bad memory that I can't talk about, you know. Maybe one day.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But actually, I just want to add, growing up in both parents being Holocaust survivors, they were remarkably normal, and all of their friends were also, who were survivors, also remarkably well-adjusted. And I think it says something about your resilience. I know you have helped young people.
Yeah, that's important for you to know, that in spite of all the things that happened in the past, and it will happen in other people's life one way or the other, there are tragedies that happen. You have to be resilient and not blame your past on your future. You have to do the best for you and for your country and for your family that you can without blaming your misfortune in the past. So that's what we all did. We came to this wonderful country. We worked, we worked every type of work. Somebody could be a professor someplace and he became a presser or laying bricks or whatever they could do, sweeping the floor, working hard and building themselves up, building families. Their families went to school, they went to college, they went to law school, they went to and they survived and they flourish. And they hopefully bring on good vibe to the next generation.
Hi, my name is Jason Benezra, and I just want to say thank you again for sharing your story. It's beautiful, and I appreciate it. My question was, were there any fond and pleasant memories of your brother and father before they passed that you could share with us?
There were a lot of wonderful. My brother was wonderful. He was sweet, he was smart, he was loving, he was my older brother. And he would have been such a wonderful person if he survived. And it's a long story, I can't go through it, how he was caught and died. But one thing I want to say that when he was 13, my mother was trying to hide him. My father was already killed. And he says, I can't be in hiding all the time. And my mother said, soon the war will be over and you will do whatever you want. And he says, I can't wait for the new thing. I want to live a little. And unfortunately, he was caught by the Gestapo and taken. And my mother said, there's one thing I have to mention. My mother said, look, if they catch you, they will torture you and you will say where we are hiding. And all those people that are hiding with us, there were like 10, 15 people there, all of us will be killed. And he says, Mom, I swear, even if they catch me and if they torture me, I will never say where are you hiding. So don't worry. And they caught him and they tortured, but he never really divulged the place where they were hiding.
Thank you.
Hi. First, thank you, of course, for sharing with us. My name is Tobias Cohen, and I wanted to ask you, if after the war, where you went to Israel and came here to the United States, did you ever go back to Poland and to visit all of those places?
Yes. For years, I didn't want to go because it was too hard to remember those places. But after a while, we went just with my husband first, and we checked all the places that we lived and where he lived and all the concentration camps that he was in. And then a few years later, we went with Gail and Howie, and we went to all the places again, and to Auschwitz, and the children and we had a wonderful victory thing that in spite of all that, we survived and we flourished, and we have a wonderful family. And it was our victory against Hitler's thing to destroy every Jew, We are here, and some of us, whoever we are good people. And that's what.
Thank you.
I just want to add that when we went to Poland with my parents, we went to Auschwitz, which my father was from the village of, and he was a slave laborer and was forced to build the camp. When we went there, because he had been there, they gave him kind of VIP treatment, and we had a special guide, and we were going through the worst part of the concentration camp with, I don't know if any of you are familiar with, you see the shoes and the glasses and all of that, and it was in the summertime and it was hot. And the guide, because my parents were elderly and important, whatever, they cut us through the line. Somebody spoke to the guide in German, another tourist in German, and I could see that, and she answered him, and they went back and forth, and I could see that the guide turned white. And I said to her, my parents were ahead, and I said, what just happened? And he said, that tourist just asked me why we were cutting ahead. And I told him that this man had been imprisoned in the camp, and he had been a prisoner here, and that he was revisiting the camp. And the tourist said, if he had been here before, what does he need to come back and cut in line? Doesn't he remember it? And we couldn't believe, I didn't even tell you guys, that here we were in the camp in front of all of that, and there's still people who are like that. So it was really just a bad memory of the camp, going back to Poland.
Before we continue, I just want to announce that the ones that are in the line are the last ones to ask questions, and maybe we can do 3 questions together, and then we'll do the last 3.
Hello, my name is Michael, and my question is, how old were you when the war ended, and how old are you right now?
Right now, it's between 50 and 100.
You don't look a day over 40.
But when the war ended, I was 10 years old.
Alright, thank you.
Yeah,
But you don't look a day over 30.
Thank you.
These pictures behind are actually from right after the war.
Yeah, this is after the war. This is before the war. Which one? Oh, this is Polish with the family during. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Miles. I wanted to say thank you very much for sharing your experience. And my question is, how important do you think it is for more survivors to step forward and share their experience so people can realize how big of a deal it is, and so the younger generation can realize how big of a deal it is and pass it on?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Sponda. I'm one of the teachers here at Soffer. Thank you for the courage and bravery to share your story. I know it wasn't easy. But my question for you is, how did your faith help you through all that you went through?
Yeah. Well, it's important for all the survivors to speak as much as we can. And I know that it's harder and harder for us to do that. And to be in this country, it makes it so easy. And I have the freedom of saying whatever my heart desires without being discriminated. But we have to protect it because it's very easy to lose it, you know.
Your faith. How did your faith hold you through? And how did you come back to Judaism? Because you were
Oh,
pretending to
yes,
be Catholic.
yes. Well, that's a long story, but there were times that I could not believe, to be honest. I'm in a temple, I shouldn't say that. But I lost my faith in God because I could not believe that God will permit those things to happen to so many innocent people. But slowly, with my mother's help and with gentle coming back, and I know that when the death was on my doorsteps, I prayed to God, you know, even though I couldn't believe it, but yet when I said, I want to live, please God, save me, I prayed to Jesus, I prayed to everybody, just help me, help me, help me. You know, when there were opportunities. So the prayers were always in my heart, but sometimes logically my heart was one way and my mind was, I can't believe that this is happening, you know.
Hello, my name is Mariana Parama. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. It truly is an honor to hear your story.
Thank you.
My question is, after hearing about all the recent events that, for example, the rabbi had talked about, do you feel it's something that's shocking or it's something expected that people still have these types of feelings?
Absolutely. That's why people are sometimes uninformed and they are born with this negative attitude about humanity. And I still believe that in general people are good, you know. It's just that they are taught the wrong way. You have to be taught from the beginning about tolerance and love and help. And people that are having good family that teaches them from childhood, they become good people, you know. So you have to be taught to love.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel Zikri, and before I start, I just want to say thank you so much for being here because it's obviously difficult for you to be here. So my question is, because of how you were taught to pray for Catholicism, was it difficult for you to kind of adjust to Judaism when coming back to Israel? Was it difficult for you to celebrate holidays, pray?
Well, actually, it was so gradual, and it was so my mother made sure, like with other people were laughing from me, how come I still don't transform, you know, I was 11, I was 12, and my mother said, leave Stasha alone, I will take care. And she was giving me, I don't have time to tell you, but she was even quoting from the operetta La Juive, which is like a famous opera actually, where the father is begging during the Inquisition in Spain, and that the father is begging his daughter to convert, to save her life. And there was a song to it. My mother was singing to me, and she would say, no, 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 I remember my mom was singing to me, I rather be killed than to be denied my Jewish thing. And every little thing, once I said, oh, I don't want to be Jewish because they will kill me. And my mother said, we have plenty time to worry about it, you know. Don't worry, sweetheart, you know. So she was gentle and very smart, and she let me be who I am. And little by little, she would say, how would your father feel if you know. She gave me those little hints, and eventually I became a very strong believer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniela, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
My question is, after you told us about how you had to adapt this new identity and go through a lot of change and a lot of new things, new families, new people that took you in, did your perception on family change, and was it difficult for you to adapt all these new people in such short periods of time?
Well, you have to roll with the punches, and you have to, in a situation like this, you have to live as good as you can and be as helpful and as positive as you can. And no, I wanted to belong. A family is where you belong to somebody. When you have friends or family that embrace you, that know that you can trust them, this is family. Sometimes a community, a congregation, it's a family. Because you might have someplace a cousin in California, but you know it's a family, but you don't see them, you don't hear from them, and you have a family of a temple or of a church or whatever it is, that is really a family. So I embraced every family that I was with them, and I actually wanted to be adopted. When I knew that everybody was killed, they said they will adopt me after the war, and I wanted to make sure that they won't chase me away, they won't throw me away. Of course, they didn't know that I was Jewish. That's why I couldn't admit, because I was afraid they will destroy me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's give Stella another round of applause. We're about to conclude, but I want to invite the moms of the parent network from the school to present Stella with a gift. And I also want to invite our mayor, Howard Weinberg, to the bima. He's going to deliver some closing remarks. But before we conclude, I just want to guide you through the process that will take you back to school. The way we are going to exit the sanctuary is through that door there to my right, and the reason for that is because we have a Holocaust memorial section there that we want to make sure you visit. There's a monument honoring the victims of the Shoah, a monument for the children, and one for the fighters of the resistance. So you are going to live in whatever way Dr. McKee says, but through that door. And I want to say, in Hebrew, there's a word that we use when we bid farewell, which is lehitraot, which means that we'll see each other soon. And we have the commitment from the school and from the city to continue hosting this event for the years to come. So I want to say you lehitraot. We'll see each other exactly a year from today here at the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center to continue learning from our Holocaust survivors. Mayor Weinberg.
Hi, Cindy Orlinsky and the parents of Don Soffer High School. We just wanted to say thank you, and how touching everything is, and how wonderful you are to share your story with us and our children.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. There's not going to be any speech. I'm here to thank you for attending and to ask you something, but I just want to say that thanks to our speaker, I have a new favorite answer to a question I get all the time. I, too, am between age 50 and age 100. So thank you. I want to ask you, please find a way to do your part to make sure that history does not repeat itself. Find your way to fight anti-Semitism and hate and intolerance and racism. There's always a way. When I was a young lawyer, when I was a younger lawyer, I was very fortunate. Steven Spielberg, the great Steven Spielberg, started a foundation after the movie Schindler's List to record the video testimony of survivors, and I volunteered, and I was so privileged. I was able to do 11 interviews that are now in repositories around the world. When you have children, your children will not have the benefit of live testimony from survivors. That's just the reality. This opportunity, this amazing opportunity that's available to us will not be available to your children. So please find your way, because it is so important. Your message is so important, and I know that all of you can help to deliver that message and just make our world better. Thank you very, very much for being here. We'll see you all next year. On behalf of my commission and the City of Aventura, we thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do have to thank Don Soffer as well, Mr. Soffer. It's just amazing to have your continual support. And to our commission, the parents, our mayor, our city manager and deputy city manager. You guys are fantastic. The entire Aventura police force, always there to support us. So thank you all for making this day happen. And Ms. Sonnenschein, we will not forget. You have embedded in our hearts a powerful message that will carry us throughout life. So thank you. That was beautiful. Again, everyone, we're going to go through this way to make sure we experience the memorial on the way out. So we're going to start with this section right here. Then if we can just keep the flow going, you guys will come down this center aisle and follow straight around this way from the center side. Thank you. Teachers, please do your best to stay with your students. They'll go back to the room, get their backpacks, make sure they're all accounted for, and then we'll have one lunch for all. Thank you. That's my GQ model there. That's model
3. I want to come over to the school and volunteer.